Prologue, the battle that never happened, yet never stopped haunting the gods. High above the world, thunder still echoes across mountains. Deep below, in a realm untouched by light, shadows whisper the names of the dead. Between these two extremes stand two brothers, born of the same blood, divided by destiny. Zeus, ruler of the sky, master of lightning. Hades, lord of the underworld, sovereign of the inevitable end. History tells us they never went to war. Fate itself seemed to forbid it. Yet the question has never faded. If the sky and the underworld were to clash, who would truly prevail? Zeus commands fear through spectacle. His power is visible, deafening, and immediate. A single bolt of lightning can shatter mountains and silence gods. When Zeus moves, the universe trembles, and everyone knows who holds the throne. Hades, however, rules in silence. His power does not strike, it waits. Every victory, every death, every fallen hero eventually crosses his domain. He does not need to conquer the heavens, for time delivers all souls to his gates. Ancient myths speak in fragments, of Olympus shaking when Zeus raged, of the underworld stirring when Hades rose from his throne. Some legends whisper that on a night without stars, the two brothers once locked eyes across the veil of existence, each aware that a single step forward would tear reality apart. Perhaps that is why the battle never happened. Not because one would lose, but because the world itself might not survive a victor. And so the question remains, echoing through eternity. Was Zeus truly the mightiest god, or was Hades the one power even the king of the sky dared not challenge? Part 1. Zeus. The power of the sky and the fear that rules in plain sight. Zeus is not merely a god of thunder. He is the embodiment of visible power, the kind that announces itself before it strikes. When Zeus acts, the heavens respond. Clouds gather. Lightning fractures the sky. The world below pauses, aware that something unstoppable has been unleashed. His authority is not subtle, nor is it quiet. Zeus rules through overwhelming presence, through the undeniable proof that resistance is futile. From the very beginning of his reign, Zeus established himself as a god who could not be ignored. His rise was born in violence and rebellion, forged in the ashes of an old order. As the youngest son of Cronus, he was never meant to rule. Yet it was Zeus who dared to challenge the Titans, who led the Olympians into a war that reshaped the cosmos itself. The Titanomachy was not just a battle. It was a declaration that the age of raw, primordial power had ended, replaced by a new tyranny dressed as order. Lightning became Zeus's signature not merely because it was powerful, but because it was instant and absolute. Unlike blades or fire, lightning allows no defense, no negotiation, no delay. It strikes from above, from a place unreachable. In this way, Zeus positioned himself as a god beyond confrontation. Mortals and gods alike learned that to anger Zeus was to invite annihilation without warning. Fear for Zeus was not a side effect of power, it was a tool. Olympus itself reflects this philosophy. Bright, elevated, exposed to all realms, it is a throne meant to be seen. Zeus wanted to rule where everyone could witness his dominance. Every storm was a reminder, every thunderclap a warning. His justice was swift, but often brutal. Cities that defied him were destroyed. Kings who challenged divine authority were reduced to ash or madness. Even fellow gods learned to tread carefully, for Zeus's temper was as unpredictable as the storms he commanded. Yet Zeus's strength was not limited to destruction. He was also the architect of cosmic law. Under his rule, oaths became sacred, hospitality was enforced, and hierarchy was rigidly maintained. Zeus presented himself as the guardian of order, but it was an order sustained by fear of punishment. The message was clear: obey or be struck down. This duality, protector and executioner, made Zeus both revered and resented. Mortals prayed to him not out of love, but necessity. Gods followed him not out of loyalty, but caution. His authority rested on the assumption that no one could overpower him in open conflict. And for most of mythological history, that assumption held true. But power displayed so openly comes at a cost. Zeus's reign required constant reinforcement. He could never appear weak. Every challenge, no matter how small, demanded a response. This is why Zeus punished Prometheus so cruelly, not merely for stealing fire, but for defying him publicly. Mercy would have been interpreted as weakness. Zeus could not afford that. The eagle, the chains, the eternal torment. These were spectacles meant to remind the universe of his dominance. Similarly, Zeus's paranoia drove him to extreme measures. Prophecies haunted him, especially those predicting that one of his own children might overthrow him, just as he had overthrown Cronus. To prevent this fate, Zeus swallowed Metis, his first wife, trapping wisdom itself inside his body. It was an act born not of strength, but fear. Fear that power, once seized, could just as easily be lost. This reveals a crucial truth about Zeus. His power is immense, but fragile. Zeus dominates the present moment. His lightning decides battles instantly. His authority crushes rebellion before it can grow. But means of control that rely on fear must be constantly renewed. Storms must rage. Punishments must be severe. The king of the sky must always remind the world why he sits on the throne. In contrast to gods like Hades, whose power grows passively over time, Zeus must actively assert himself. His victories are spectacular but temporary. Each generation brings new challengers, new heroes, new threats that must be crushed. Heracles, Typhon, the giants, each represented a test of Zeus's supremacy. And while Zeus prevailed, the need to fight at all exposed a weakness. His power could be questioned. Even among the Olympians, Zeus's authority was not absolute. Hera defied him. Athena challenged his decisions. Poseidon openly contested his rule at times. The gods feared Zeus, but fear does not create unity, only submission. Beneath the surface of Olympus lay resentment, rivalry, and suppressed rebellion. Yet when Zeus stood alone, weapon raised, the universe held its breath. No god could match his raw offensive force. No mortal could survive his wrath. Zeus was the storm that ended wars before they began. His strength lay in the immediacy of destruction, the certainty that when he chose to act, resistance was meaningless. And still, one question lingered, unspoken but ever-present. What happens when fear no longer works? What happens when lightning strikes those who are already dead? When punishment means nothing to those beyond pain? When power measured in moments collides with power measured in eternity? Zeus could shatter mountains, burn cities, and erase lives in an instant. But his dominion ended at the edge of the grave. Beyond that threshold lay a realm untouched by thunder, a kingdom where lightning did not rule, and where fear took a very different form. Zeus was supreme in the open sky, under the watchful eyes of gods and men. His strength informing awe, obedience, and terror. But it was a power designed to be seen, heard, and felt immediately, and that perhaps was both his greatest strength and his greatest vulnerability. Part 2. Hades, the silent power and the absolute rule that no one escapes. Hades does not announce himself. There is no thunder when he moves, no blazing light to warn the world, no trembling mountains, no skies split open in fear. When Hades exerts power, the universe does not scream, it falls quiet. And in that silence, everything obeys. Unlike Zeus, whose strength dominates the present moment, Hades governs the unavoidable future. He does not need worship, applause, or spectacle. He rules what comes after all victories, all defeats, all lives. His domain does not challenge the living world, it waits for it. And that patience is his greatest weapon. From a moment the cosmos was divided after the fall of the Titans, Hades received what appeared to be the least glorious realm, the Underworld. No sky, no seas, no sunlicht, only shadows, stone, and the dead. Many myths portray this as misfortune, as if Hades were cheated of honor while his brothers claimed the heavens and the oceans. But this interpretation misunderstands the nature of true power. Zeus rules what can be resisted. Poseidon rules what can be crossed. Hades rules what cannot be avoided. Every empire, every god, every hero, no matter how mighty, eventually belongs to him. The underworld is not chaos. It is not an abyss of screaming souls and endless torment, as later myths and modern imagination often suggest. It is a perfectly ordered system, one that functions without rebellion, without war, without challenge. Souls arrive, are judged, and are placed. Time loses meaning. Desire fades. Resistance dissolves. And at the center of this system sits Hades, not as a tyrant who must constantly prove dominance, but as an absolute authority whose rule is unquestioned. No god has ever attempted to overthrow Hades in his own realm. Not Zeus, not Poseidon, not even the Titans dare to challenge him there. This is not because Hades is weaker, but because his power operates on a level that makes rebellion meaningless. In Olympus, power is unstable. Alliances shift. Gods conspire. Even Zeus faces defiance from Hera, Athena, and Poseidon. The Sky King must constantly reinforce his authority, punishing dissent and crushing threats before they grow. In the underworld, there is no dissent. There is no hope of escape. That is the difference. Hades does not rule through fear of pain. Pain is temporary. He rules through finality. Once a soul enters his domain, it no longer dreams of victory. There is no army to gather, no weapon to forge, no future to plan. Even the most heroic spirits, Achilles, Hector, kings and conquerors, become shadows of memory. Their identities dissolve, leaving only echoes of what they once were. This is not cruelty, it is inevitability. And inevitability is the purest form of power. Hades himself reflects this philosophy. He is rarely described as wrathful or impulsive. He does not rage, seduce endlessly, or seek admiration. He does not interfere in mortal affairs unless necessary. He does not punish out of pride. When Hades acts, it is because the balance of existence requires it. This, remember, is why even Zeus respects the boundaries of the underworld. The king of the sky may command lightning, but he cannot resurrect the dead at will. He cannot overturn judgment once a soul is claimed. He cannot invade Hades' realm without consequence. The few times gods attempted to cheat death, Heracles, Orpheus, Persephone herself, it required negotiation, sacrifice, or deception. And even then, the cost was devastating. Hades always collects what is owed. His marriage to Persephone is often misunderstood as a symbol of cruelty. In truth, it reveals the nature of his rule. Hades does not conquer Persephone through force alone. He binds her through law, ritual, and cosmic contract. Once she eats the pomegranate seeds, the bond becomes irreversible. Not because Hades is violent, but because the rules of the underworld are absolute. No amount of love, grief, or divine outrage can break them. Demeter shows the world what happens when life rebels against death. Crops fail. Seasons collapse. Mortals starve. The universe itself begins to unravel. Only when a compromise is reached, half in light, half in shadow, does balance return. This myth reveals a terrifying truth. Life cannot exist without death's permission, and Hades is the one who grants it. While Zeus controls storms that can destroy civilizations, Hades controls something far more terrifying: continuation. The cycle of existence passes through his hands. Without him, souls would accumulate, stagnate, rot. The universe would drown in immortality. Death is not an enemy in this system. It is a function, and Hades is its administrator. Even the gods fear what he represents, not because he is cruel, but because he is correct. There is no argument against him, no rebellion against death that does not end in death itself. This is why Hades inspires a different kind of fear, one quieter, deeper, and more permanent than Zeus's thunder. Zeus terrifies through destruction. Hades terrifies through certainty. Lightning may strike once. Death waits forever. In a hypothetical confrontation between Zeus and Hades, this difference becomes critical. Zeus would dominate the battlefield, unleashing storms that could tear apart gods and worlds alike. But every fallen warrior, every destroyed god, every casualty of divine war would swell the ranks of the underworld. Hades would grow stronger with every strike Zeus makes. And unlike Zeus, Hades does not need to win quickly. Time is irrelevant to him. Eternity is his ally. The longer a conflict lasts, the more it tilts in his favor. This is why myths never allow the brothers to truly fight. Not because Zeus would lose immediately, but because there would be no end. A war against death is not a war you can finish. Hades represents the final check on power itself. No matter how mighty a god becomes, no matter how vast an empire grows, death will eventually reduce it to memory. And memory, too, fades. Zeus may be king of gods, but Hades is king of outcomes. In the silence of the underworld, there are no revolutions, no coups, no betrayals. Only acceptance. Not peaceful acceptance, but absolute acceptance. The kind that cannot be undone. That is why Hades does not need temples on every hill, nor prayers shouted into storms. His worship is universal and involuntary. Every breath taken by the living is a delayed acknowledgement of his authority. Every life is a countdown, and every countdown ends in his realm. Hades does not seek to be feared. He does not need to be loved. He does not demand obedience. He receives it, eventually, and in that inevitability lies a power so complete, so final, that even the king of the sky understands one truth he never dares to challenge. The heavens may rule the living, but the underworld rules everything that remains. Part 3. When two absolute powers collide, who would truly win? There are wars that decide kingdoms. There are wars that decide eras. And then there are wars that cannot be allowed to happen, because their outcome would not merely reshape the world. It would erase the very rules that make existence possible. A confrontation between Zeus and Hades belongs to the third kind. It is not simply a clash between two gods or even between two brothers. It is a collision between two philosophies of power, two interpretations of what it means to rule, to dominate, and to endure. Zeus represents power that acts. Hades represents power that waits. If they were ever to turn against one another, the question would not be who is stronger, but what kind of strength ultimately prevails. The battlefield. Where could such a war even begin? No battlefield could contain them. The sky is Zeus's domain, but it is open, exposed to all realms. The underworld is Hades' domain, but it is sealed, bound by laws older than Olympus itself. A war fought entirely in one realm would already favor one brother over the other. So imagine a third space, a fracture in reality where sky, earth, and death overlap. A place where Olympus bleeds into shadow, where lightning illuminates fields of ash, where the living and the dead exist side by side. Such a place would not be created by choice. It would be born from catastrophe. The first sign would be silence. Storm clouds would gather, yet thunder would hesitate. The dead would stir, not in rebellion, but in awareness. Even the gods would feel it, that unmistakable pressure that signals something forbidden is about to occur. This is where Zeus would strike first. He always does. 2. Zeus strikes, the dominance of immediate force. Zeus does not wage slow wars. His power is not designed for attrition. It is designed to end conflicts before they mature. Lightning would fall like judgment incarnate, precise, overwhelming, merciless. Mountains would shatter. The air itself would become a weapon. Any god, spirit, or entity caught in the initial assault would be erased before it could react. This is Zeus at his most terrifying. Not the ruler, not the lawgiver, but the executioner of gods. In this phase of the war, Zeus would appear unstoppable. His strength is raw, direct, and apocalyptic. He does not negotiate with inevitability. He challenges it. He would seek to overwhelm Hades with speed and destruction, to prove that even death can be forced into submission. And for a moment, perhaps a long moment, it might seem as though he succeeds. The sky would burn, the world would tremble, and the dead would fall again. But Zeus's greatest strength is also his greatest limitation. Every victory must be immediate, because Zeus cannot afford a long war. 3. The cost of lightning. When every strike strengthens the enemy, every being Zeus destroys has somewhere to go. Every fallen god, every annihilated spirit, every casualty of divine thunder does not disappear. They cross a boundary. And beyond that boundary stands Hades. This is the paradox Zeus cannot escape. His power is measured in destruction. Hades' power is measured in accumulation. The longer the battle continues, the more the underworld swells. Souls pour in, not as rebels, not as allies, but as resources. Memory, identity, ambition, all stripped away, leaving pure existence under Hades' authority. Hades does not need to counterattack immediately. He does not need to match lightning with lightning. He only needs to allow Zeus to continue winning. Because every win deepens Zeus's eventual loss. This is where the nature of power reveals itself. Zeus dominates the battlefield. Hades dominates the outcome. 4. Hades responds. The war that has no climax. When Hades finally moves, it is not with spectacle. There is no grand explosion. No sanderes vitaliaschen. Instead, the rules begin to change. Time slows. Not magically, but existentially. The urgency of battle fades. Warriors feel exhaustion that has nothing to do with wounds. Gods begin to realize that their strength does not regenerate as it should. Not because Hades weakens them, but because he removes the meaning of effort. Fighting death is easy when you believe victory matters. It becomes impossible when victory no longer leads anywhere. Hades' power manifests as inevitability. No matter how many times Zeus strikes him down, Hades returns, not resurrected, not reborn, but never truly gone. Because death cannot kill death. Even Zeus understands this truth on some level. He overthrew Cronus. He imprisoned the Titans. He destroyed monsters that threaten the cosmos. But Hades is not a threat to be eliminated. He is a function of existence. To destroy Hades would require destroying the concept of endings themselves. And that would unravel everything. V. The psychological war. Fear versus certainty. Zeus rules through fear. Hades rules through certainty. Fear can be resisted. Certainty cannot. As the war drags on, Zeus's greatest weapon, terror, begins to lose effectiveness. Gods who have already died once no longer fear dying again. Spirits with nothing left to lose fight without desperation, without hope, without panic. This is unfamiliar territory for Zeus. He has never ruled those who no longer care about consequences. Hades, meanwhile, does not need loyalty. He does not need morale. He does not inspire. He absorbs. This is the war Zeus cannot win, because it is not a war that ends in surrender. 6. The final realization. Why the war must never end. At some point, whether after centuries or mere moments, Zeus would face a realization more terrifying than any prophecy. There is no final blow. No matter how much lightning he commands, no matter how many victories he claims, Hades remains. Silent, patient, absolute. To truly defeat Hades, Zeus would have to abolish death. And without death, the universe would collapse under the weight of endless existence. Souls would stagnate. Time would lose direction. Meaning would dissolve. Zeus would win the war and destroy reality. Hades would lose the battle and preserve existence. And that is why the war never happens. 7. Who is the true victor? If victory means domination in the moment, Zeus wins. If victory means control over eternity, Hades wins. But the deeper truth is more unsettling. Neither can defeat the other without annihilating the world they rule. Zeus cannot destroy death. Hades cannot overthrow life. They are not enemies by chance. They are codependent absolutes. The sky needs an ending. Death needs something to end. This is why mythology never gives us their war. Not because the outcome is unclear, but because the outcome is unacceptable. Epilogue: the war that defines power without being fought. Zeus remains king of the gods because Hades allows the living world to continue. Hades remains lord of the dead because Zeus allows life to flourish. Their balance is not peace. It is tension, a silent agreement older than Olympus itself. And perhaps that is the most terrifying conclusion of all. The greatest war in mythology is not the one that was fought, but the one that must never be allowed to begin. Conclusion: not stronger, only different forms of power. In the end, the question was never about who is stronger. Zeus and Hades were never meant to defeat one another, because their power does not exist on the same scale. Zeus rules the moment, through force, spectacle, and the fear of immediate destruction. His lightning defines authority in the present, shaping the world through action and consequence. When Zeus strikes, history changes instantly. Hades, however, rules what comes after history ends. His power is not measured in battles won or enemies crushed, but in permanence. Every victory, every rebellion, every god who falls ultimately passes into his domain. Where Zeus enforces order through fear, Hades maintains it through inevitability. One commands obedience, the other receives it, without resistance, without exception. This is why there can be no true victor between them. A world ruled only by Zeus would burn itself out in endless conflict, consumed by the need to constantly prove dominance. A world ruled only by Hades would stagnate, frozen in eternal stillness, stripped of growth, struggle, and meaning. Existence survives because neither power is absolute on its own. Life needs an ending to matter. Death needs life to give a purpose. Zeus is the storm that reminds the world it is alive. Hades is the silence that reminds it nothing lasts forever. They are not rivals competing for supremacy. They are opposing truths holding the universe together. And perhaps that is the most unsettling realization of all. The greatest power is not the one that conquers the other, but the one that knows when not to strike. Between thunder and silence, the world endures. Part 2. Zeus, the tyrant enthroned by fear. If Zeus is praised as the architect of order, he is equally remembered as a ruler whose authority was sustained not by love, but by fear. Beneath the grandeur of Olympus and the rhetoric of divine justice lies a darker portrait. Zeus as a tyrant whose power demanded submission, whose law tolerated no defiance, and whose thunderbolts served as both judgment and warning. In this interpretation, fear is not a side effect of his rule. It is the foundation upon which it stands. Unlike benevolent deities who inspire devotion through compassion, Zeus commands reverence through intimidation. His presence is announced by storms, his will enforced by lightning, and his anger immortalized in catastrophe. Mortals do not merely obey Zeus, they tremble before him. The sky itself becomes a weapon, transforming nature into an extension of authoritarian control. Fear, in this sense, is institutionalized, woven into the very fabric of the world. One of the most revealing aspects of Zeus's tyranny is his intolerance toward challenge. The myth of Prometheus stands as the clearest indictment. Prometheus, a titan who sided with Zeus during the Titanomachy, commits an unforgivable act. He gives fire, knowledge, and hope to humanity. His crime is not violence or betrayal, but empowerment. Zeus's response is merciless. Prometheus is chained to a mountain, condemned to eternal torment as an eagle devours his liver day after day. This punishment is not corrective, it is exemplary. It sends a message to gods and mortals alike. Progress without permission is rebellion, and rebellion will be crushed. Fear, under Zeus, functions as deterrence. Punishments are excessive by design, meant to echo through generations. Entire bloodlines suffer for the crimes of individuals. Cities are destroyed not only for wrongdoing, but for arrogance, for daring to believe they could rival divine authority. Hubris, the greatest sin in Greek thought, is less about moral failure than about political insubordination. To challenge Zeus is to threaten the hierarchy, and hierarchy must be preserved at all costs. Even among the gods, Zeus rules through coercion. Hera, his queen, is bound by marriage yet repeatedly humiliated. When she conspires against him, Zeus does not reason with her. He suspends her from the heavens with anvils tied to her feet. Apollo and Poseidon, after rebelling, are stripped of their status and forced into servitude among mortals. These episodes reveal Olympus not as a harmonious council, but as a court ruled by fear of reprisal. Zeus's authority is absolute, and dissent is met with degradation. In some lesser-known and partially fictionalized traditions, it is said that Zeus feared one thing above all else: the prophecy of his own overthrow. Like his father Cronus, Zeus is haunted by the knowledge that power invites replacement. This fear shapes his rule. He crushes threats before they mature, neutralizes potential rivals, and asserts dominance relentlessly. Tyranny, in this light, is not cruelty for pleasure, but cruelty born of paranoia. Zeus does not trust the future. Therefore, he controls the present with an iron grip. The use of fear extends beyond punishment into surveillance. Zeus sees everything. His gaze pierces clouds, walls, and hearts. Mortals believe their actions are always observed, their intentions always judged. This omnipresence eliminates the possibility of private rebellion. Fear becomes internalized. People police themselves, not because they believe in justice, but because they dread consequences. Zeus does not need to strike constantly. The threat of lightning is enough. One striking contradiction is that Zeus often violates the very laws he enforces. As guardian of oaths and protector of hospitality, he demands moral discipline from others. Yet his own conduct is riddled with transgressions. His countless affairs, deceptions, and abuses of power expose a double standard. Law applies downward, not upward. Tyranny is defined not merely by harsh rule, but by exemption from the rules imposed on others. Zeus embodies this imbalance perfectly. Fear is also aestheticized in Zeus's image. Ancient hymns describe him as awe-inspiring, terrible in majesty, beautiful yet terrifying. This duality transforms fear into reverence. Worshippers are taught not to question whether Zeus is just, but to accept that his will defines justice. In this framework, morality is replaced by obedience. What is right is what Zeus permits. What is wrong is what he punishes. Fear becomes moral authority. In expanded mythic narratives, some poets imagined a hidden chamber beneath Zeus's throne, filled with shattered thunderbolts, each representing a civilization erased, a hero silenced, a rebellion extinguished. Whether literal or symbolic, the image reinforces the idea that Zeus's reign is built upon the ruins of resistance. Peace exists, but it is the peace of domination, not harmony. Yet tyranny sustained by fear carries an inherent weakness. It creates silence, not loyalty. The gods obey Zeus, but they do not trust him. Mortals worship him, but rarely love him. Fear prevents chaos, but it also prevents genuine unity. This tension simmers beneath Olympus, threatening to erupt should Zeus ever show weakness. His authority, though immense, is fragile, dependent on the continuous projection of power. A fictional fragment speaks of a night without thunder, when Zeus hesitates before striking a city guilty of defiance. In that moment of restraint, the sky remains silent, and whispers spread among gods and mortals alike. If Zeus can hesitate, can he be resisted? The myth suggests a terrifying truth for tyrants. Fear must be constantly renewed, or it fades. Zeus as a tyrant does not negate his role as a lawgiver. It complicates it. His justice is real, but it is enforced through terror rather than consent. Order is maintained, but at the cost of freedom, compassion, and trust. This version of Zeus reflects a harsh political reality familiar throughout human history. stability achieved through fear is effective, but morally compromised. Ultimately, Zeus's reign forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. If fear keeps the world from collapsing into chaos, is tyranny justified? Zeus offers no easy answer. He stands as a warning carved into myth that power, when unchecked, will always cloak itself in the language of justice, and that fear, once enthroned, rarely relinquishes the crown. In Zeus, tyranny is not an aberration. It is a method of governance. His thunderbolts are not merely weapons, but symbols of a system where obedience is survival and dissent is annihilation. He is worshipped not because he is kind, but because he is unstoppable. And in that terrifying certainty lies the darkest truth of his divinity. Zeus does not need to be loved to rule the world. He only needs to be feared. Part 3. The fragile line between justice and fear. Between the image of Zeus as the supreme lawgiver and the vision of Zeus as a merciless tyrant lies a narrow, unstable boundary where justice and fear become almost indistinguishable. It is within this space that Zeus's true complexity emerges. He is neither purely the guardian of moral order nor solely the embodiment of terror. Instead, he exists as a paradox, a figure whose authority depends on balancing righteousness with intimidation, stability with violence, legitimacy with domination. This fragile line defines not only Zeus's reign, but the very nature of power itself. Justice, in its ideal form, is meant to restrain fear. It promises predictability, fairness, and protection against chaos. Fear, by contrast, thrives on uncertainty and submission. Yet in Zeus's rule, these two forces are intertwined so tightly that separating them becomes nearly impossible. His laws are clear, but their enforcement is terrifying. His punishments are justified as necessary, yet their scale often exceeds moral proportion. What begins as justice gradually transforms into something harsher, an order maintained not by trust, but by dread. The Greeks understood that absolute power cannot exist without fear. Zeus, as the supreme authority, embodies this truth. He is omnipresent in myth, watching from the sky, listening to prayers, observing transgressions. This constant surveillance creates a psychological reality in which mortals internalize fear as morality. People behave not because they believe an action is right, but because they fear divine retribution. Over time, fear replaces conscience. Justice becomes external rather than internal, enforced from above rather than chosen from within. This transformation reveals a crucial tension. When justice relies on fear to function, it risks losing its moral legitimacy. Zeus punishes oath breakers, violators of hospitality, and perpetrators of hubris, but his responses often blur the line between correction and annihilation. Entire cities are destroyed for the arrogance of their leaders. Innocents suffer alongside the guilty. Generations are cursed for a single act of defiance. In such cases, justice no longer appears as balance, but as excess. Fear expands beyond its role as deterrence and becomes collective trauma. Yet Zeus cannot abandon fear without undermining his authority. His rule depends on the perception of invincibility. If the gods or mortals believe Zeus can be challenged without consequence, the cosmic order begins to fracture. This creates a tragic cycle. To preserve justice, Zeus must appear terrifying. To remain terrifying, he must inflict punishment. Each act of punishment strengthens fear, and each increase in fear distances justice from compassion. The system sustains itself, but at the cost of humanity. One of the most telling contradictions is Zeus's relationship with mercy. Mercy requires vulnerability, the willingness to soften judgment in recognition of suffering. Zeus rarely displays such weakness. When he does, it is often concealed, indirect, or constrained by fate. This absence of mercy reveals a deeper truth. Mercy threatens authority. A merciful Zeus would invite negotiation, resistance, and moral debate. A feared Zeus silences all questions. In choosing fear over mercy, Zeus ensures obedience, but forfeits moral intimacy with those he rules. Some expanded and fictionalized myths describe Zeus standing alone on Olympus after judgment has been passed, listening to the echoes of thunder fade into silence. In these moments, he is said to feel the weight of his own decisions, not as guilt, but as inevitability. Zeus understands that the world he governs cannot survive without order, and that order cannot survive without force. Justice, for him, is not an ethical ideal, but a functional necessity. Fear is simply the price of stability. This realization places Zeus closer to a tragic figure than a villain. He is trapped by the very system he enforces. If he rules gently, chaos returns. If he rules harshly, he becomes monstrous. There is no middle path, only a constant adjustment along the fragile line between justice and fear. Each decision risks tipping the balance. Each thunderbolt reinforces order while eroding moral trust. The gods themselves sense this instability. They obey Zeus, but they also watch him. Alliances form quietly. Resentments linger beneath obedience. Olympus remains intact, not because it is harmonious, but because fear suppresses conflict. Justice, once a unifying principle, becomes a mask that conceals tension rather than resolving it. The divine hierarchy survives, but it is brittle, dependent on Zeus's uninterrupted dominance. For mortals, the consequences are even more profound. Zeus represents the ultimate authority, shaping how humans understand law, punishment, and power. Kings model themselves after him. Laws reflect his rigidity. Violence is justified as necessity. In this way, Zeus's fragile balance influences not only myth, but civilization itself. When rulers claim that fear is required for order, they echo Zeus's logic. When justice becomes indistinguishable from punishment, his shadow looms large. A fictional prophecy speaks of a time when Zeus's thunder will no longer inspire fear, only noise. In that future, justice will either collapse or be reborn without terror. Whether this prophecy signifies hope or disaster remains unclear. What is clear is that fear is an unstable foundation. It preserves order temporarily, but corrodes loyalty and meaning over time. Justice built on fear may endure, but it cannot evolve. Ultimately, Zeus's greatest legacy is not his thunderbolt, but the question he forces us to confront. Can justice exist without fear? Or is fear an inevitable companion of power? Zeus offers no resolution, only tension. He stands forever on that fragile line, a god whose justice terrifies and whose fear stabilizes. In this unresolved balance lies the enduring power of Zeus as a symbol. He is not merely a figure of myth, but a reflection of humanity's deepest anxieties about authority. Every society that seeks order must decide how much fear it is willing to tolerate in the name of justice. Zeus reminds us that once fear becomes indistinguishable from law, justice risks losing its soul. Thus, the thin boundary between justice and fear is not only Zeus's dilemma, it is ours. And like Zeus, we remain suspended above the world, thunder in hand, uncertain whether we are protecting order or merely ruling through terror. Conclusion. Zeus endures as one of the most powerful and unsettling symbols in all of mythology precisely because he cannot be reduced to a single truth. He is both the embodiment of justice and the incarnation of fear, and these two identities are inseparable. His reign teaches that justice without power is fragile, easily shattered by chaos, while power without restraint inevitably descends into tyranny. Zeus occupies the uneasy space where these forces collide, reminding us that authority is never morally neutral. As the supreme ruler of Olympus, Zeus enforces order on a cosmic scale, preserving balance in a universe constantly threatened by excess and rebellion. Yet the methods through which he maintains this order expose a darker reality. Justice enforced through terror demands obedience, not understanding. His thunderbolts do not persuade, they silence. They create stability, but at the cost of trust, compassion, and moral clarity. In Zeus's world, peace is real, but it is a peace born of submission. This duality is what makes Zeus timeless. He is not merely a god of ancient myth, but a mirror reflecting humanity's enduring struggle with power. Every system of authority faces the same dilemma Zeus embodies: how to protect order without becoming oppressive, how to punish wrongdoing without ruling through fear. Zeus offers no comforting resolution. Instead, he stands as a warning carved into legend, a reminder that when justice and fear share the same throne, the line between protector and tyrant becomes dangerously thin. In the end, Zeus is neither wholly righteous nor purely monstrous. He is the shadow cast by absolute power itself. And in that shadow, we are forced to ask not only who Zeus truly is, but what kind of justice we are willing to accept.